Hello everybody and welcome back to Herbies Garage. Today I'm working on my Lifan KPM 200 and I have the side panels taken off of it because today we're going to be doing a diagnostic video on what happens if my bike won't start. We're going to be checking the battery and the battery systems, and we're going to be checking the fuel pump and for no spark. So we're going to be checking all of those things, and we're going to get started right away checking the battery. Now I'll leave a link in the description for some of these tools I'm using. It's a pretty simple basic check that I'm going to be doing, and this meter is not that expensive. And there's another tool I'm going to leave a link to. I'll show you that in a minute that we're going to be using. But one of the first things you want to do is check how much voltage your battery has resting. It should have, if it's a healthy battery, between 12.6 and 12.75. Now we're going to check the cranking voltage and see how far down it drops. We want to keep it above 10 if we can, 10 volts. Sometimes it'll drop down into the 9 area, but you want to turn your kill switch off or turn it on or whatever, turn it so it doesn't start, and then crank it over and see how far down it drops. If it drops down to 5 or 6 volts, you probably need to replace your battery. See, mine dropped down to about 10.9. That means that my battery is still a healthy battery. Now we want to check the starter solenoid. And there's two checks that we can make on this. One is to see if the button on the handlebars, whenever you hit the start button, is passing power to engage your starter solenoid. That's the first thing we're going to check. So we want to take these two terminals off like that, and then we're just going to get a standard little test light, nothing special. But this is the other thing I was telling you about that I'm going to put a link in the description for. So on one side I'll put a clip on it so I can put my one end of my tester in it, and the other end I'm just going to shove inside of it. Now whenever I hit the start button, it's not going to start, but it should light this light. Okay, I turned it on. Now I'm going to hit the start button. See the light? I don't know if you can see that. Okay, now I'm going to hit the start button. See it light up? That tells you a couple things. Number one, it has enough power, which is 12 volts, to come down to engage the starter solenoid. And the other is that you don't have a break because it can support a load. A loaded circuit is going to be read more accurately than an unloaded circuit. And the load is the light that's inside of this test light. So we know that this is good because this lights this up. Now what happens if we do this test and this doesn't light up? Well, let me show you what one or two things it could be. Okay, if you look right here on the left side of the battery, there's a fuse box. And you can lift this fuse box out. It just lifts up. It's in there. And then you just push this tab in the front and then the lid opens. Now I'm going to show you what happens if we pull one of these fuses, which would simulate a bad fuse, a blown fuse. Okay, now I'm going to put this in, and now we're going to hit the start button. We'll see if it'll light up. See if you can see that. All right, now I'm going to hit it, and it lights up. So we know that that fuse doesn't play any part in the starting circuit. This is the second fuse. Now we'll get the lower fuse down there and take that one out. Now we'll try it again. We'll see if it lights up this time. And it doesn't. So if this fuse blows, the starter solenoid won't engage because no power is coming down to it. Not only that, the gauges aren't working, headlight's not working. So if the headlight's not working, gauges is not working, and this is not engaging, then it very well could be this fuse. So you got to be sure and check it. This very bottom one. Okay, now we'll put these back on. All they do is slide on. Okay, now we have to check the starter solenoid itself. In order to do that, we have to put our test light. We're going to put our negative on the negative side of the battery. And then we're going to put our other end of the test light on the black side. Because if we were to put it on this side here, it would come on without hitting the key or anything because it's got power going through to that side. See that? But this side doesn't have anything yet. Let me get it on there. See, this side doesn't have anything yet. Now watch what happens whenever I turn the key on and hit the start button. See that? It lights up. What it's doing is I'm hitting the start button. It's engaging the power is down inside of the solenoid. It's pulling the contacts up and it's passing contact from the positive over to this cable and then it's going down to the starter. So if you do this check and you hit the starter with everything connected and you had already checked this and you know that this works, it has 12 volts and will support a load, and you check it here and it doesn't light up, then you have a bad starter solenoid. Okay, let's say you have an issue with fuel. Your fuel pump is not pumping, so the bike won't start. You turn the key on. Now listen, you're going to hear the fuel pump engage. Did you hear that? For about 3 or 4 seconds, the fuel pump came on and then shut off. That has to cycle, otherwise you won't have any fuel pressure to start your bike. Now what if yours doesn't do that? Down here at the bottom of the tank is an electrical connection on the fuel pump. Easy to find. I didn't even have to look. I just reached under there and grabbed it. The fuel pump is right here. So what we need to do is we need to find out if we have voltage to this. How are we going to do that? We're going to put our test light on it. All right, the way I'm going to check this is I'm going to use some back probing probes, and I'm just going to run it in the front. They call this front probing. If I was to back probe it, it'd go back here in the back. But these are small, they won't hurt anything. If you don't have these, you can use a paper clip. Paper clip is fine. Then we're going to use our light, and we're going to attach one to our negative on our light, like that. Let me hang that down. And the other, we're going to hook to our test light. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the key on. You see it light up? Now it's going to go out after 3 or 4 seconds. See that? It went out on its own. The key is still on. I'm going to try it again. Lights up, goes out. That's cycling exactly the way it's supposed to. Now what if it doesn't? Now see, first off, I want to say that this whole circuit is good. Everything's going to be good for this pump to run at this point because you've got it loaded with this light. It's pulling amperage through this light to light the light. So your wiring integrity is good. Your fuel pump relay is good. Fuses are good. Everything's good, and the pump should run. If you got voltage to here, if it'll light a light and it still doesn't run, you got a bad fuel pump. All right, now we're going to talk about what happens if you don't have enough power here to turn this light on. Where do you go next? Okay, this very center one, there's 1, 2, 3. These are relays. This very center one is the fuel pump relay. Let me pull it. Okay, there's my fuel pump relay. I took it out. Now I'm going to show you, I'm going to turn the key on and nothing's going to happen because the fuel pump relay is disconnected. See, it did not run. That means that that fuel pump relay, if it was connected and this didn't happen, that fuel pump relay could be bad and need replaced. Now, if this relay is bad, you don't really want to swap it out and put one in there from these other ones. You can do that to check it, but you're better off getting you another relay and putting a new relay in it. Now, I'll show you that it will come on now with the relay in it. Another thing you can check is your fuses. Now watch, I'm going to pull one fuse. Now watch what happens. I'm going to turn the key on again. Nothing. So if that fuse is blown, you won't have anything either. You have to make sure that that fuse is good. Now, this fuse here is like a main fuse. If that one's blown, I'll show you, it won't do anything either. But not only will this not work, your headlights don't work, your gauges don't work, none of that stuff works. So that's kind of like a main relay. So that's a clue to where if nothing is working, this fuse right here is the one that you need to look for. But you always want to check both of them just to make sure. And then this one over here is a spare. If one of them blows, you can take this one out and put it in. But if either one of those fuses are blown, your fuel pump relay, your fuel pump won't run. As long as they're both good, the relay's good, and all your wiring integrity is good, that should work. Those are the main components of things that could cause you issues of your fuel pump not running. A fuse, a relay, or the fuel pump itself, or it could be wiring. But like I say, if you check the integrity of everything here at the plug that plugs into the fuel pump and it lights up here at the fuel pump, all of this other things are still good. But if the pump doesn't run, then your fuel pump most likely is bad. One of the last things we're going to check is the spark. Now there's a few components that can cause no spark. And your wire is one of them. You could have a bad plug, you could have a bad coil, you could have bad CDI, bad ECU, something like that. But today all we're going to do is we're going to check for spark. I'm going to show you what a good spark would look like. Okay, I'm going to crank it over now and I'm going to show you what the spark should look like. See, that's a good, healthy spark. And that's the way it should look. If you don't have a spark, then you have to backtrack and see what it is. Sometimes this boot itself, you can unscrew it, cut the end of the wire off, screw the plug, the boot back on, and that's all the issue is. But I'm not going to get into all of what could be and way to check the coil and all that kind of stuff. I just wanted to show you what a good spark would be. If you don't have spark, then you have to backtrack and find out if it's in the coil. So you have to take my tank off in order to get to the coil, but you have to check the coil and the wire and things like that. Now after we've done all of our tests, we want to start the bike and make sure that everything's good. Turn the switch, the kill switch, to run. Turn your key on and it should fire right up. Those steps that I showed you are pretty basic, and there are things that need to be checked first. So you don't want to go for the hardest thing first, which would be the ECU. I didn't even get to the ECU and show you inputs, outputs, and all that kind of stuff. There is ways to check the ECU. The ECU can cause no start. It can cause the fuel pump not to run. It can cause no spark. It can cause all kinds of issues. But if you're checking basic diagnostics, like what I was showing you, you want to make sure you got battery voltage. You want to make sure your starter motor's turning over. You want to make sure that you got enough power at the plug of the fuel pump that it will light a light. That's carrying a load. If it lights a light, it will turn that pump on and make that pump run. The ECU is allowing power to go to the pump to start it. So if it's got power there, like I said, you have a bad pump. There's really no other thing that it could be if your pump's not running. You have to make sure when you turn that key on that you hear that pump cycle. That's a very important thing. And as far as spark goes, I didn't really get into that too far because I really have to get in underneath the tank and check farther into there and show you things on that. Really, there's only a couple checks to do, and one is to check the ignition coil. Most of the time, if you were just to check resistance in the coil, it's going to be a low resistance, 0.5 to 0.7 ohms, something like that. And if you've got that, you've got 12 volts going to the primary side of the coil, then you should be getting power through that coil. So if you got 12 volts to the coil and it's still not firing, you either have a bad coil or you have a bad coil wire. That's the main point, because everything behind that, from that coil back, is working if you're getting 12 volts to the coil. It's really simple diagnostics. Just get yourself a meter, a test light, and things like that. It doesn't cost that much, and they're really easy tests. These are pretty simple motorcycles to work on. And anyway, I just wanted to demonstrate that to you guys. And if you are having a no start condition, having issues with your bike, and this didn't cover it, just let me know. Maybe I can make a separate video on the spark or something like that I didn't cover in depth. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful and may have helped you or somebody else with their issues they're having with their bike. Anyway, that's all I have for you today, and I appreciate you coming along. I'll see you on the next one.